Hello, it is I, Dr. Cinema, here for another Dr. Cinema diagnosis. Now, the other day, I was watching a classic movie, the 1931 film Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. I can't quite remember his name, but it's from 1931. It's a really well made film, and it helped me realize that Universal Studios is correct. They did make the first cinematic universe way back in the 1930s. I mean, sure, it's not the kind of cinematic universe we've known from the Marvel cinematic universe or the DC extended universe, but still the first cinematic universe. With the sequels doing crossovers, especially one where there's Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Dracula, and it's just really great that something like that has existed for so long. So it appears that it makes sense that eventually they were going to make an attempt at rebooting their Universal Monster Cinematic Universe. Although now it's called the Dark Universe. Now, to be honest, the idea of creating a modern cinematic universe of the classic monsters like Frankenstein, Dracula, and the Mummy is actually very interesting. However, here's the problem of trying to do that today. And it has nothing really to do with competitors like the MCU or the DCEU. It's the fact that at this point there have been so many different kinds of adaptations of so many of its characters that there really isn't much option of what they can do differently with it. However, they did try to do that back in 2014 with the film Dracula Untold. Now, financially, it was a big success, but it wasn't really that well received by critics. However, the main character, Vlad the Impaler slash Dracula, played by Luke Evans, was actually a pretty strong performance. And the premise of focusing on Vlad the Impaler and how he became Dracula to protect his country and his family is actually a very interesting premise and a good entry point for a cinematic universe. And the action, even though it has been edited for PG-13 rating, is still entertaining and fun to watch. I'm actually kind of surprised that movie didn't launch the cinematic universe. I mean, sure, it's no Iron Man, no the Avengers, but it's still a pretty great entry point, to be honest, for a launch of a cinematic shared universe. However, that didn't really plan out because a few years later, 2017, Universal Studios has announced the relaunch of its cinematic universe, Dark Universe, with The Mummy. And the results of that movie are actually pretty similar to Dracula Untold. Financially, it was a success. I mean, the 2017 film, The Mummy, was Tom Cruise's biggest box office opening in international theaters. However, from a critical standpoint, it did worse than Dracula Untold. I mean, with Dracula Untold, yeah, it still had intrigue, you still liked the main character, and the action was entertaining to watch. With The Mummy, it lacks that spirit, lacks that intrigue as far as a standalone Mummy movie goes. Like I said in my review of The Mummy, even though it doesn't work as a standalone movie, it still kind of worked as a first chapter of a shared universe. Now, with obviously, since this is the first official entry of Dark Universe, many people now assume that Dracula Untold is no longer canon. Although we haven't really gotten confirmation whether or not this is true or not. I mean, the creators are saying that yes, Dracula is going to be a major character in this universe, even though they have no immediate plans to make a Dracula film. But the events of Dracula Untold could still potentially work. I guess things are still pretty up in the air on what they want to do next, because obviously the Mummy didn't do quite what they want, even though they're still going through with this universe idea. The next confirmed film is going to be Bride of Frankenstein in early 2019, which obviously, which is kind of a big risk. I mean, even though the original Bride of Frankenstein is considered one of the greatest sequels of all time, remaking such a film is going to have a lot of expectations that it may or may not be able to fulfill. However, there is a lot of promise with how they can go about this. Because you see, with the 2017 film, The Mummy, even though this is the launch pad of a shared universe, they did say that, well, if you want the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies to be canon, they technically can be, since the events of those films took place nearly a century before this 2017 entry, and there is an Easter egg in this new Mummy film that doesn't really contradict the existence of the Brendan Fraser movies. So, with them saying that, yeah, those films can be canon if you want them to, that still leaves the opportunity of not only having that Dracula Untold movie being canon, but also how they can potentially go about with future entries in this universe. I mean, The Bride of Frankenstein could focus on a Frankenstein family that's not exactly a remake of the original Frankenstein family, but more of like a continued expanded family kind of thing. I'm not quite sure how exactly that one would work. But another entry to do in the universe is the Invisible Man. And potentially, instead of just remaking the Invisible Man, they could focus on a descendant of the original where the condition is hereditary. So there's a lot of potential interesting ideas that could happen in Dark Universe, which is why I'm urging you people to not give up on it quite yet, because there is a lot of promise here that, as long as they can figure out how to properly write and direct it, can still be very good and worthwhile. I mean, this could be a potential cinematic universe that can still let you believe, that still lets you enjoy the movies in the past that you've enjoyed, but also could pay off in the long run. Yes, Brendan Fraser is the better mummy protagonist. I'm not disagreeing with you. Sorry, he's a huge fan of the Brendan Fraser mummy films. But like I said, but like I said, there's a lot of potential in the Dark Universe, so I'm willing to stick around and see how this new cinematic universe holds up. I urge you to do the same. Hell, you can even go back and watch some of the original movies like I just did, or watch some of your more guilty pleasures of these creatures, such as the Brendan Fraser The Mummy or Dracula Untold. I mean, Dracula Untold, as you can tell, is one of my favorite guilty pleasures. Well, those are my thoughts on Dark Universe. It has a lot of history, and even though it's off to sort of a rocky start, it can still have the potential of being very great, very interesting, and very different and fun. But those are my thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Dr. Cinema. See you next time.